I couldn't stop shaking. My whole world had just snapped in half. The person closest to me had turned on me, just like that. No warning, no reason I could understand. And in the same breath, I lost everything that kept my life standing. My income, my security, the future I thought I had. Gone in a 10-minute conversation with a man who thought I was nothing. Just another replaceable woman who dared to rest for 1 week. I walked out of that office feeling empty, humiliated, stupid for ever trusting any of them. Betrayed at home, betrayed at work, grieving a life I had built from zero. But underneath all that pain, something else woke up in me, because he had no idea who I really was, or what was waiting for him next. My name is Emma Harris. Before that day, I thought I was doing everything right. I was the reliable one, the one who stayed late, picked up the slack, fixed other people's mistakes, at work and at home. If something needed doing, it somehow ended up on my list. I told myself that I was just being responsible. I'd been at the company for almost a decade. I knew every system, every shortcut, every quiet crisis no one talked about. People came to me before they went to my boss. He called me the glue. I wore that like a compliment. At home, it was similar. I paid most of the bills. I planned the meals, the weekends, the rare days out. My partner would joke that I was the organized one, like he'd just been born messy and there was nothing to be done. I laughed it off. I liked feeling needed. It felt like proof I mattered. I trusted him, completely. I'd given him access to everything. The flat, the accounts, my schedule. We talked about the future in that vague, comfortable way long-term couples do. It felt solid, not exciting, not dramatic, just safe. There were little things looking back. He was on his phone more, turned slightly away from me on the sofa, screen dimmed, quick to flip it over when I walked in the room. He said work was stressful. I believed him. I knew what stress looked like. I saw it in the mirror every morning. At work, my boss started making those jokes that aren't really jokes. Don't burn out on me, Emma. You're too valuable. Holiday? What is this, a travel agency? Just remember, the people who climb are the ones who show up. Always with a smile, always in front of other people, so if I pushed back, I'd look overly sensitive, so I didn't. I just nodded, smiled, and opened my laptop again. Then my body gave me away before my mind would. I nearly fainted in the kitchen one morning. Just dropped the mug, hot coffee everywhere, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't pick it up. I went to the doctor later that week, still answering emails in the waiting room, blood tests, blood pressure, the works. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You need a real break, not a weekend, a holiday, at least a week." A week. It sounded ridiculous, indulgent, impossible, but that word need stuck. I told my boss first. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course," he said, "you've earned it." Then, after a pause, "Just make sure everything's covered. We can't afford loose ends." I went home and told my partner. He didn't hug me or say, "Good, you deserve it." He just frowned at the calendar. That week? Really? It's not great timing for me. For you? I remember asking it quietly, like I was already apologizing. He backtracked, said he was happy for me, that he'd see what he could move, but the enthusiasm never came. We didn't talk about it again. I booked it anyway. First real holiday in 9 years. I tried to feel excited. Mostly, I felt guilty. The night before I was due to leave, I was packing. He was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the bedside table. Then buzzed again, and again. I glanced over, meaning to ignore it. But the screen lit up, and the preview was right there. A woman's name I didn't recognize, and a sentence that made my stomach drop. "Can't wait till she's gone so we get the whole bed to ourselves this week." My hand moved before my brain caught up. I picked up his phone, opened the chat, line after line, plans, jokes, little comments about me, about how I'd never suspect a thing. The water was still running in the bathroom when the room started spinning. I don't remember sitting down, but I was suddenly on the edge of the bed, his phone in my hand, my heart thudding so loud I could hear it over the shower. I scrolled. It wasn't a one-off. There were weeks of messages, photos, private jokes, little details of my life turned into punchlines. How I stacked the dishwasher, how I color-coded the calendar, how I lived for work emails. He'd told her I was basically married to her job, and that he was just waiting for the right time to move on. They'd laughed about my holiday, called it her guilt trip. By the time he came out of the bathroom, I couldn't feel my hands. He saw the phone. His face changed, then smoothed over. "It's not what you think," he said, still damp, still casual. "You're tired, Em. You're reading it wrong." I wanted to scream. Instead, I heard myself asking small, practical questions. How long? Who she was? Why? He gave half answers. Said it hadn't meant to go this far. That it was just talking at first. He turned it back on me so easily, I almost admired it. I'd been distant, always working, always exhausted. He'd felt lonely. I lay awake all night beside him, staring at the ceiling, thinking about canceling the trip. But the doctor's voice was still in my head. You need a real break. And now I needed space to even hear myself think. So I went. On the plane, I opened the messages again. I read further back than I had the night before. Twist 1. They'd been talking for almost a year. Little references to last Christmas, to a weekend when she was at that conference. He'd told her things I'd only ever said once, late at night, when I thought I was safe. My fears about not being good enough, my panic attacks, they were all there, dissected and analyzed between them. At the hotel, I checked my banking app out of habit. Twist 2. Our rainy day savings were almost gone. Transfers to his account, card payments to places I'd never been. A boutique hotel in a city he'd told me he'd gone to for a client meeting. The same dates as photos in their chat. I sat on the bed, surrounded by white towels and brochure smiles, and felt stupid. How had I not seen it? How had I been doing HR risk assessments all day and missed the disaster in my own house? Work emails kept coming. Little, quick questions. One thing I forgot to ask. I answered them at first, then stopped. I'd handed over everything. I'd earned this break. I repeated that like a prayer. On the third day, my boss sent an email to the whole senior team. I wasn't supposed to be copied, but someone left the old group list in. Given recent events and Emma's absence, he wrote, I'll be asking Mark to step up and cover key responsibilities for the foreseeable future. Twist 3. My projects, my role, quietly handed to someone else while I lay on a hotel bed trying not to cry too loud through the walls. My throat closed. Recent events, my sick note, my holiday, my whole life bending under the strain, turned into a vague problem he could manage. I went back into the messages with my partner, looking for something, anything that made sense. I found a screenshot he'd sent her, an email from my boss to him. I knew the wording. It was part of a check-in I'd written myself, months ago, asking for flexibility while I tried to get my health under control. My boss had replied to me with a stiff, "Of course, take care of yourself." The forwarded version to my partner had one extra line at the bottom. Between us, I'm not sure she's cut out for senior responsibility. You've said she's struggling at home too. Might be time to think about alternatives. Twist 4. They'd been talking about me, my partner and my boss, sharing my private messages, judging whether I was cut out to handle the life I'd built. The room didn't just spin then, it dropped. Because in that one sentence, I realized it wasn't just that I'd been betrayed. They'd been planning a future that didn't include me at all. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just went very, very still. It was like someone had turned the volume down on the world. The air conditioner hummed. A car passed outside. My phone screen dimmed in my hand. I put it down on the bed and stared out of the window at nothing in particular. If I moved, I felt like I might shatter. The first clear thought that came was small and practical. Save everything. I picked up the phone again, forwarded the emails to a private account, backed up the messages, took screenshots of the bank statements. Not angrily, just methodically. Dates, times, subject lines. Then I closed everything and sat back. For a while, the only thing I felt was shame. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they were just venting. Maybe I'd worked too hard, been too absent, too intense. Maybe this was my fault. That was the hook, I realized. If I believed that, they didn't have to. My parents had raised me to be fair, not to humiliate people, not to use power just because you had it. I could hear my mum's voice in my head. Don't sink to their level, Em. You still have to live with yourself. The problem was, I knew exactly how much power I had. When the company was small, before my boss had his title, before the nice offices, I'd put everything I had into it. Money, time, all my 20s. The early investment had turned into a quiet majority stake, held through a structure that meant my name wasn't printed on every bit of paper. The board knew, our lawyer knew, my boss. He thought I was just HR and operations. Part of me wanted to march into his office the moment I got home and tell him everything I'd seen. Part of me wanted to forward every message between him and my partner to the entire company, to their families, to anyone who'd ever believed their nice, steady personas. Instead, I did nothing. Not nothing exactly. I made a decision. I would not shout. I would not beg. I would watch. I would go back from my holiday, on time. I would answer emails. I would show up. I would give them every chance to put in writing what they had already decided between themselves, that they were done with me. If they wanted me gone, they would have to make it official. And then, when they had, I would do the one thing they never expected. I would tell the truth. To the board. To the people who actually owned the building they walked into every morning. To the woman who thought she was getting my life handed to her neatly, not embellished, not dressed up, just the facts they'd left lying around, thinking I was too tired, too loyal, too small to ever use them. I lay back on the hotel bed, hands folded on my stomach, heart still racing. For the first time in a long time, I didn't plan how to save them. I started planning how to let them undo themselves. I went back to work the following Monday as if nothing had happened. People asked polite questions about the holiday. I gave polite answers. It was quiet. I slept a lot. That was true. My boss was overly warm. Too many smiles, a hand on my shoulder he'd never used before. He asked if I was feeling more like myself. I said yes. I let him talk. In the weeks that followed, little things shifted. Meetings I'd normally lead happened without me. I'd see them in my calendar, then see the invite quietly canceled. Tasks I'd handled for years were reallocated to mark for balance. I noted each change in a private document. Dates, times, whose idea it supposedly was. At home, my partner behaved like someone waiting for a storm that never arrived. He was gentle, helpful, oddly careful with his words. I didn't bring up the messages. I didn't mention the money. I transferred my salary to a separate account and stopped topping up the joint one. I watched. The formal meeting invite came on a Thursday. Subject line, role and responsibilities discussion. I replied, happy to attend. In the small glass room, my boss had a printed script in front of him. HR sat beside him, looking uncomfortable. I recognized the forms. I'd helped design them. They called it a business decision, said that with recent performance concerns and my absence, they needed someone more present in the role. They offered a basic package, no acknowledgement of my years there, no mention of my approved holiday, my doctor's note, my workload. I let him finish. Then I asked, quietly, for everything in writing. I requested a copy of any performance concerns on record, of any meetings where these had been discussed. There weren't any. He hesitated, then said they'd pull together what they could. I signed the papers. I didn't argue. I thanked them for their time. That afternoon, from my kitchen table, I wrote 3 emails, one to the company's lawyer, one to the chair of the board, one to the non-executive director who'd been there since the beginning. I attached everything, the original holiday approval, my doctor's note, the email forwarding my private concerns to my partner, the screenshot of my boss's comments about my suitability, the bank trail showing company matters being shared with an outsider. I laid out dates, decisions, discrepancies. No adjectives, just facts. At the end, I reminded them, politely, of my shareholding, my voting rights, and my expectation that the company's own policies and legal obligations would be followed. There was no dramatic reply. Just a short acknowledgement, then silence while they did what boards and lawyers do. Over the next few weeks, I heard things secondhand, quiet meetings, an external investigator, colleagues being asked to provide timelines, my former boss avoiding the open office, moving between rooms with the blinds closed. One morning, an all-staff email went out. He was stepping down with immediate effect. No farewell speech, no party. His inbox reassigned. By then, everyone already knew something had happened. They just didn't know yet that it had started with a holiday. The email went out on a Tuesday. That afternoon, the chair called me. Emma, we'd like you at the next board meeting, as a shareholder. His voice was careful, respectful in a way it had never been when I was just HR. The boardroom looked exactly the same as it always had. Long table, jug of water, 2 bright lights. The difference was where I sat, not against the wall with a notebook. At the table, folder in front of me, place card with my name on it. He walked in late, as usual, talking to someone over his shoulder, half a laugh still on his face. Then he saw me. He stopped for a fraction of a second. It was tiny, but I saw it. The confusion first, then calculation, then something close to fear when he realized where I was sitting. the chair opened the meeting, introduced everyone, including me. As you all know, Emma is a significant shareholder and has raised serious concerns about recent events. He didn't know. I could see that land. His eyes flicked to the lawyer, to the papers, back to me. I kept my gaze on the table. The lawyer spoke for most of the meeting. He laid out the timeline, my doctor's note, the approved holiday, the emails about alternatives, the sudden performance, concerns with no record, the forwarded confidential messages to my partner, the personal commentary about my health, my suitability, shared with someone outside the business. No adjectives, just breaches, policies, legal terms. When they read out his own words about me, not being cut out for senior responsibility, no one looked at me. They didn't need to. He tried to answer, said things had been misinterpreted, that he'd only been trying to protect the business, that my role change had nothing to do with my holiday. Each time, the lawyer slid another printed email across the table. At one point, the chair asked if I wanted to add anything. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed late to make him look competent, all the weekends I'd fixed things before he even knew they were broken. I asked for help, I said quietly. I followed the process we ask everyone else to follow. That's all. Silence. Then the chair nodded and moved on. In the end, they didn't fire him. They gave him a choice: resign for personal reasons or face removal for gross misconduct. He chose to resign. No bonus, no glowing reference. His board seat gone by the end of the day. I signed the resolution with the others. My vote counted more than his ever had. At home, the ending was smaller, but it cut deeper. I printed the messages, the bank statements, the hotel bookings. I put them in a neat stack on the kitchen table. When he came in, I slid them towards him. He read the first page, then the third. His mouth opened, closed. The excuses he'd used before sounded thin even to him. I'm leaving, I said. You need to be out by Friday. The flat's in my name. The savings you spent aren't coming back. He started to say something about us, about one mistake. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to discuss. Before I blocked his number, I sent one last email, not to him, to her. No commentary, no insults, just the same stack of attachments. Make your own judgment, I wrote. I wish someone had given me the chance. At the company, the official line was measured. A breach of governance and confidentiality. People whispered anyway. They always do. I never corrected them. I just told the truth when I was asked. Calmly, once. I stayed on the board, but I didn't take his job. I took time. I slept. I went to therapy. I learned how to have days that weren't built around fixing other people's mess. Justice didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like the room finally going quiet. He lost his title, his income, his reputation in the only circle that had ever really mattered to him. My ex lost his easy life, the home he hadn't paid for, the woman who no longer believed his version of lonely. I lost the story I'd been telling myself about who I was to them. In the end, the revenge wasn't in what I did to them. It was in what I stopped doing. I stopped protecting the men who had always counted on my silence.